Hello readers, welcome or welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing hopefully an exciting video, a little bit different than my usual review contents, and I'm going to be doing a haul video. So recently I went to a used bookstore and I picked up a bunch of comics, and I just kind of want to go through and share some of those. I'm excited about reading them. I probably am not going to do a video on every single one of them, but maybe a couple, or maybe I'll do a general kind of short or something, but this is really just more so to share some of the stuff I got and hopefully bring a little bit of joy and excitement about reading. These are all used books, so pre-loved, pre-read, so I feel a little bit better about the kind of environmental impact of it, and also you usually save a ton of money buying books that way. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Okay, so we're just gonna start going through one by one, no particular order, and I'm just gonna be sharing a little bit about the book, why I'm excited about it. So we're starting with X-Men: The Age of Apocalypse, the complete epic. So it says it's the complete epic, but it's actually in 4 volumes. This is volume 2. I also was able to pick up volume 4. I currently am reading volume 1. I like it a lot. It's interesting. It's one of, from what I understand, like the most kind of beloved comics of the 90s. To me, it feels extremely 90s in a really great and fun way for the most part. Art style is super exaggerated in terms of musculature, also a little bit like over-sexualized of the female characters, but I mean, some of these characters are just so kind of ridiculous looking that you can't help but love it. Like, there's Sabretooth on the front, and just look at him, like his head is the same size as his shoulder, it's the same size as his bicep, it's the same size of one of his pecs. Like, it's just so like camp, honestly, that I am really liking it. And I think Apocalypse is a really interesting kind of character in my mind, at least so far in the comic. He hasn't played a huge part of it yet, but he's maybe not like a super straightforward villain. He kind of has his own moral code and reasons why he's doing everything, but also these stories take place in Elseworlds storyline. So basically it's not like a regular Marvel continuity, it's taking place in a separate universe. And these apocalypse heroes and this kind of apocalypse world is mentioned, and the characters are involved in Uncanny X-Force, which I read earlier this year. Absolutely loved those stories, and the apocalypse characters actually have a really big role within that story. That's obviously after the fact of these stories, but anyway, I just saw them and I thought, you know, I'm really enjoying the first one. Let me try and read these stories. Obviously, I don't have number 3 yet, but hopefully I'll find that somewhere soon. And yeah, just looking forward to reading it. It's considered to be a classic, and I always kind of try to start with the classics first and then branch out from there. The next pick is Superman Red Sun. So this is kind of an interesting story that I knew a bit about before picking it up. To be honest, I'm not like a huge Superman fan, just because I think sometimes he can be a little bit boring, kind of like a perfect hero. Like, where's the drama? Where's the character development, you know? Like, where's the struggle? He's perfect except for his like one weakness of kryptonite and everything. So, you know, kind of how many times can you bring up kryptonite before your story starts to get old? This story, however, is a really interesting concept. So it's written by Mark Millar, who is a pretty well-known comics writer. He wrote Marvel Civil War, which is one of my favorite all-time like crossover, well, not even just crossover, but one of my favorite all-time comics, really. I love the art in it. I love the story. It's really great and complex, and I read it pretty young, one of my earlier comics that I read, but still I remember and love so much about it. He also wrote the Old Man Logan story, which I read earlier this year, really enjoyed. That's a story about Logan, aka Wolverine, once he's old, and it's in this kind of like apocalyptic future essentially where the villains won and almost all of the heroes are dead or in hiding or retirement. Logan and Hawkeye, who's still alive, go on a road trip essentially of sorts, and it ensues from there, and you learn a lot more about the world and how it got to this place. But that's also a really great story that I really enjoyed. And so I've been really liking Mark Millar's stuff that I've read. I knew a little bit about this, wanted to pick it up mostly because of him, but also the story itself is kind of interesting because Superman, it's like a what if scenario, if you're familiar with that concept. It's like, what would happen if Superman's spaceship as a baby landing in Kansas lands in like Russia, I believe. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere in the Soviet Union during the rise of the Soviet Union. So interested to learn more about that and kind of the conflicts that are depicted in the story. And now, after going on that explanation of why I'm not a huge Superman fan, I actually got a second Superman comic here, which is The Death of Superman. So again, this is kind of one of the most classic Superman stories where Superman dies, and it explores how he dies, what happens with the world. The world needs him. He's the most powerful being on the planet, essentially. So how is America and society in general going to survive his loss? It seems kind of like critical reading for DC Comics. And that book itself actually was 50 cents. I got this for 50 cents. It's in really good condition. The covers, there's like barely any dents or anything. The only thing is that the pages are just like regular soft paper. It's not a glossy paper or anything, but it's in full color and everything. So what a steal. I look forward to reading that. Next, we have Twilight by Howard Chaken. This is really interesting that I found this comic because there's a guy here on YouTube that I absolutely love his videos. His channel's name is Comic Tropes, and he is like such a comics historian, and he knows so much about comics. He knows so much about writers, illustrators, different influences, styles, everything. And he'll sometimes go over a creator's entire career. Sometimes he'll talk about one specific comic and why it's a classic, why it's great, and he loves it. I absolutely love his videos, and most of the time really agree and trust his picks. But he did an interesting video on this author, Howard Chaken, and he talked a little bit about this story, Twilight, and it really just caught my interest. So I actually had it notated for myself to pick it up if I ever had a chance to, and I literally just stumbled upon it at this used books and comics store and thought, this is fate. I have to pick it up. And now a second connection with Mark Millar and Old Man Logan. I actually picked up this book, Old Man Hawkeye, the complete collection, and it's labeled as a prequel to Old Man Logan. So Mark Millar is not directly involved in this comic. It's actually written by Ethan Sachs, but I don't know, I just kind of like this world that Mark built, and interested to see these characters and a couple more characters within this universe, and kind of see what Hawkeye was up to because he was a pretty major player in the Old Man Logan stories. So yeah, I saw this and I didn't really know about it. I wasn't necessarily tracking, but I said, you know, that might be a fun read. Let me pick it up and give it a chance. Next we have JSA, The Liberty Files. Boom. This cover is a little bit dark, like the color scheme, so it might be kind of hard to pick up here, but it's actually a really beautiful cover. A pretty photorealistic art style. Another DC comic, JSA. I find JSA super interesting. Initially, for a really long time, I don't think they had much of an impact on me. Essentially, it's like the Justice League, but in the past. So I think usually their stories kind of take place around like the 50s, I want to say. maybe earlier, maybe like the 40s and even earlier than that. But it's just a precursor to the Justice League with, for the most part, a set of different heroes. In some like movie adaptations and some comic storylines, the more modern characters like Superman or Wonder Woman will be involved. But I think usually for the most part it's Hourman, Sandman, Dr. Fate, Jay Garrick Flash, and Alan Scott Green Lantern, and more of those kind of classic heroes. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about it that, in my opinion, lacks a little bit of the like shininess and excitement of the Justice League and of newer comics in general. But I think maybe I watched a Black Adam kind of recently, and the JSA team, or an iteration of it, has a role within that story, and I think they were super fun in that movie. And I've been reading more kind of tie-in stories, like the Crisis stories and all of those, and JSA definitely has a part in those storylines. So I just happened to see this. I don't really know anything about this story in particular, but the art style caught my interest, and I've been wanting to read a JSA story, so hopefully this one is pretty good and exciting, but we'll see when I get to it. Next we have Spider-Man Kraven's Last Hunt. So this one has also been on my to read list for a while. It's been something I've been looking for a while, but for whatever reason I just couldn't seem to find it. Yeah, I just saw it and I was like, you know what, this is in really good condition. I don't really like getting hardbacks just because there's a difference in size. Like you can see it's bigger and a little bit taller, so it's just kind of awkward putting with my other books. It's in really great shape, and dust cover and everything's in good shape too. And I figured, you know what, if I don't like the story that much, I can donate this book. For the time being, it's something where I can get to read and enjoy and experience the story. And yeah, it's in good shape, so I can't complain too much about that. So the rest of my books are actually hardcover, so I'm gonna spare you the spiel. Again, don't usually like getting them, but I just saw a couple of things that piqued my interest and picked them up. So this next one is The Multiversity. That's what it's called, by Grant Morrison. So Grant Morrison is a pretty renowned author. He did an Animal Man reboot for DC. He's done some of their really big events like Final Crisis and 52. This story is just a collection, from what I understand, of, again, kind of the Elseworlds concept of stories that aren't really like taking place in our main DC continuity or anything. It's really taking place in other universes, so they have a lot of chance to reimagine characters to make events as wild and fun as they want them to be. And there's no like ultimate huge risks, because you could probably even kill off certain characters and everything, because it's not the main continuity. You can do what you want. I think he also kind of explains here like why characters from other comics they're basically in different universes, and I think this has connections with probably 52 and all of the Crisis storylines, but I haven't read it. I'm not familiar with it. I just saw it. I thought it has such a beautiful cover. It's in great shape. I like Grant Morrison, and the art inside looks really beautiful. So I don't know. I just picked it up, and I'm excited to read that one, although it's a huge fat book, that one is. And then last but not least, I have Valerian Volume One, written by Pierre Christin and artwork by Jean-Claude Mézières. So Valerian, that may sound familiar. There was a movie that came out a couple years ago about one of the stories, or I don't even know if it's actually about one of the stories, but at least an inspiration from these comics. So there's really famous French comics. Luc Besson was the director of that movie, and he did Fifth Element, and he's done a lot of other movies that you've heard of too. But yeah, this is kind of the original comic where it comes from. Again, like this This book is so huge. I'm not used to comics being this big. Look how much bigger that is than Superman. These are like super beloved and influential comics, I think. It's famously been one of the big inspirations for Star Wars. And they have some comparisons in here of, you know, oh, this shot may have inspired this, blah, blah, blah. I mean, George Lucas had a ton of inspirations for Star Wars, so I definitely don't think he was like ripping off anyone's style with Valerian in particular. But I've been wanting to read this for a while. It's a French comic, and I studied a little bit of French, so I was hoping to pick up a French copy at some point, but could never find Volume 1. So I found this Volume 1 in English. I think it's a good place to start and see how I enjoy it. Also, don't think I've read a story quite this old. Oh, here we go. Okay, so it looks like the first story within this collection was published in 1967. Okay, that's actually not as old as I was thinking, because I've definitely read like New Gods. I'm pretty sure it's the 70s. Maybe it's the 80s. I think the early ones are in the 70s. Yeah, that might be the only one. So I think this predates it, but it's also a European comic, which like those just have different styles and influences. So it'll be interesting to see that and try and see if I can identify the differences in the style or the spread of how the comic is laid out. So definitely I still have a ton of comics on my to read list. I don't know if all of these are going to be like at the very front of the list, because there's some other stuff that I have just been wanting to read for a really long time, but it never hurts to have more reading on the shelf so that I always have things to look forward to reading, and it kind of motivates me to pick up a book and read. But without further ado, that's all I really have to say for this haul video. Let me know if you all found this video enjoyable, and I can definitely make some more, because I am always kind of looking for stuff whenever I have a chance to. So if you like it, I'm happy to kind of show you as I'm getting new stuff, and if I really like it, talk about it more in an in-depth video. If you've read any of these, I would love to know your thoughts, because like I said, I'm really looking forward to all of them. I wouldn't have gotten them if I wasn't excited, but if there's one in particular that you read and you thought, wow, I really love that book, I think you'll love it, I would love to know those types of things so I can kind of prioritize my TBR, to be read list. Thanks so much for tuning in as always. Hope everyone is doing super well in 2023, and I definitely have some more review types of videos on the way, just dating, and coming sooner rather than later. So stay tuned for those. But until then, I will see you on the next one. Bye.